Thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So yeah, as Tom said, today I'm going to be talking about nat-rep samples. Some of you may be thinking, hey, this isn't our remit. We let the research agencies handle this sort of thing. At Core, we speak with a lot of research agencies, and one of the big pushbacks that we get from them is, hey, this isn't within our control. It's the clients that decide who they want to target. So what I'm hoping is that by the end of this talk, if I can get like a handful of you guys to be on our side, this will make convincing the rest of the industry to take action a lot easier for us. So fingers crossed. Um, so let's start. What is a nat-rep sample? I'd imagine most of you watching are fully aware, but for anyone who isn't, a nat-rep sample is supposed to be a research sample that reflects the entire population of the country in question. At its best, it will match the national proportions of gender, age, socioeconomics, ethnicity, and more. Today, I'm going to be focusing on ethnicity and why nat-rep is so problematic. So to start with, panel companies are rarely able to provide truly representative sample within time and budget constraints. As Etty has pointed out in her presentation, ethnic minorities are often grouped as a part of a sort of monolith, meaning that individual ethnic groups are rarely represented proportionately. Data weighting, which is a tool that's used to make up for sample bias, is often problematic and overdone to the point of jeopardizing the significance of the data. Now, I'm not an expert in quant research. My realm is mostly qual. So I reached out to someone who is an expert in quant, Gurleen Sagu from Lucid, and here's what she had to say. Age, gender, and location are generally the only quotas considered for a nat-rep sample at present. When ethnicity is factored into the equation, I've personally seen data weighting of 1.8 to 2.0 and more, which is far higher than would be acceptable for other quotas such as gender. And if clients demanded more ethnic representation, we would find a way, but most of the time, it's not something clients are particularly interested in. Those are her words, not mine. So through the work I do at Core and the MRS D&I Council, I've heard many different reasons for why ethnically diverse quant is problematic, but something that keeps coming up is what I've dubbed the vicious cycle of quant. It starts with the fact that ethnic minorities are a low incidence target on most panels. So any low incidence target comes at a higher cost. The increased cost inevitably leads to lower demand. The lower demand leads to less investment. And what I mean by that is panel companies have less incentive to work towards increasing the ethnic minority membership on their panels because hardly anyone's asking for them. So this then puts us back to square one, where ethnic minorities are low incidence and the cycle continues. Now, what I'm showing you here is the opposite. It's the virtuous cycle, which could be achieved, in my opinion, if truly national representative samples in terms of ethnicity were the norm. And it starts with an increase in demand. As Gurleen said herself, if clients asked for it, they would find a way. So the result would be more investment in panels. More investment would mean that ethnic minorities would be higher incidence, and as such, the cost would go down. The lower costs, I expect, would increase demand, and the cycle would continue from there. Now, one of the initiatives that we're working on at Core is the City Rep Pledge that calls for research agencies to base the benchmark of their ethnic diversity in terms of their workforce on the city that they're based in and not the country overall. And this has now been included into the MRS CEO pledge. But when we announced this pledge, many people, mostly working in Qual, misunderstood that we were talking about the workforce and actually thought that we were talking about sample. And it got us thinking that, it's true. Why would you base the ethnic makeup of your focus groups or your depth interviews on the national demographics? It doesn't make sense. And I've got a few examples of projects that I've worked on in the past that really highlight that point. So the first one, as I mentioned earlier, I work in, well, I haven't mentioned it, I work in field work. So it's my role to identify and recruit the participants of the research studies that clients commission. Some time ago, I worked on a project for a famous superhero movie franchise, and this client wanted 3 groups of teenagers in London who had seen the movie. So in the first group, we had 7 white kids, 1 Asian kids, and everything was fine. The second group were all white, and again, the client was fine. In the third group, we had 3 white kids, 3 black kids, and 2 Asian kids. I called the client after the groups were finished and was told, "You let us down on this last group. My client isn't happy. We need to redo it." I was confused. I asked, well, what was wrong with this group? And his answer was, well, there were too many ethnics. The group wasn't representative of the UK. Now, London is 40% ethnic. So, of the 24 children we had, if we were going based on London, that would have been 9 or 10 of them being ethnic. But he was basing his benchmark on the UK overall instead of the area that we were conducting the research in. And you can see how that doesn't really make sense. The next study I want to talk about highlights the other side of that problem. So this was a project for baby milk. It was in-home interviews with new mums using baby milk formula. There was 80 mums across the UK, 10 in 8 different locations. Now this client was, a bit more progressive. They wanted to make sure that each area was nationally representative, and what that meant to them was 2 ethnic respondents in each location. And this worked out fine for most of the locations, but I remember one in particular, which was a complete shambles, and that was Carlisle, which is 94.36% white. So for the best part of a week, I had a recruiter up there visiting pharmacies, corner shops, stalking the streets, looking for the one brown person in the village, and it didn't really work out. So yeah, this just goes to show again how this sort of blanket term, this blanket criteria for ethnicity it just doesn't work. So this example is a recent study that really interested me. It was an online community with women in Barking in Dagenham, Redbridge and Newham. Now this client wanted to make sure that within each borough we had a perfect split to represent the cultures that live there. And the result is what you can see in the grid there, different in each area, but this is all still within London. And the reason why they needed to go so granular was never clear in the spec, but I assumed it must have something to do with race and culture. But it turned out the project was about energy bills. The race was pretty much irrelevant. They just wanted to make sure that the research truly reflected the communities that lived in those areas. So using ethnicity statistics of cities rather than just a blanket nat-rep quota, this is what truly representative focus groups of 8 would look like in different cities around the world. And as you can see, the numbers vary from place to place because that's the reality of the UK. I mean, if you look at Leicester, for example, only half of the group would be white. But this is what fair representation in qual looks like at the moment. You tend to see, 6 or 7 white, 1 or 2 not white. And a lot of the time, this is what happens, and no one really bats an eyelid about it. When does it matter? I'm sure some of you are thinking that, this is all well and nice, but for a lot of the time, the ethnicity of the participants don't really matter to the project. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it does matter. How can we measure the importance of the insights that we never got? I love to cook, and I love to cook for the family. I love cooking dishes that I've never tried before. Let's say I've chosen a dish to cook and followed the recipe, but while cooking, I've forgotten a key ingredient. The result is probably going to taste pretty good, and the family are going to all eat it. There'll be no complaints, but is the dish what I actually set out to create in the first place? No, it isn't. Would I be able to tell the difference? No, I wouldn't, because I haven't tried what the dish is supposed to taste like. So likewise, the results of the research that you conduct if you're not including different ethnicities, the results may be good. You may get some great insights, but the insights you missed may have been game changing. And how would you ever know? What can you do about it as clients? Further to my point in the last slide, I think first we need to ask the question, does it matter to you? You know, can you afford to miss out on those insights? And the next one would be to, I think, as an entire industry, we should expect true representation as standard. You know, when you're commissioning research agencies, fieldwork agencies, freelancers, why do we not expect adequate ethnic representation as standard? And if the suppliers that you're using are pushing back, they can't do it, I would say increase the diversity of the suppliers. You know, there are plenty out there in the industry who are able to recruit ethnic minorities. It's really, as Conrad mentioned, it's really not actually that difficult to reach out to people and get them on projects. So yeah, I mean, this diversity thing and how we actually include more people in research is doable. And you know, you as the top of the research hierarchy can really make it happen, but simply by just being a bit more conscious of it and requesting it more often. And that would be my final thoughts. I'll pass you back to Tom.
Theo, fantastic. Loved it. Very powerful stuff and very thought-provoking as well. Like, Theo, I'm going to ask you to, oh, you've already done it, unshare your screen, and I'm going to ask Stephen to share his screen whilst we look at a couple of the questions, if that's okay. Theo, Lucy Lindley is asking, in social research, the BAME category is typically used for analysis. I always question how useful this broad category is, but how do we go about ensuring we have enough survey completions to break this down into more valuable subgroups?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, this is part of the problem, is that, you know, when you lump everyone together, the research that the results that you're getting, you know, how much value do they have? And if you're trying to weight them to increase, I mean, I think really what we need to do is increase the sample sizes. And in order to increase the sample sizes, we'd probably need to decrease the cost. And so it goes back to that virtuous cycle. I said, if we as an industry can start to demand more ethnic representation in research, the panel companies, the research, the recruitment teams, they will find a way to meet that demand. And so, you know, the more responses that we can get, as time goes on, it will get easier and easier. But I think it will be a gradual process. But yeah, it really just comes down to more sample. We need to get more people on panels who come from ethnic backgrounds and can represent different cultural groups.
Okay, I'm cognizant of time, Theo. There's a second question. What do you classify as Asian?
Again, it's a very broad term. You know, Asian covers everything from Indian to Chinese at the moment. So again, it sort of goes back to what Etty spoke about. The term BAME and just lumping everyone together, the term Asian and lumping everyone together, even the term Black and lumping everyone together. There are very different cultures within these subgroups. So the more we can do to break them up, and it's going to be for the better. But in order to do that, we need more responses. We need more participants in research so that we're able to break those up because we have the sample sizes. So it all sort of ties into each other, I think.
Okay, I think we need to leave it at that, Theo. Again, you can ask Theo more questions after in the panel session at 10:15.